Fear doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it wears the face of logic, of caution, of just being realistic. But beneath every hesitation, every moment of paralyzed breath and shrinking posture, there is a doorway, and most people never open it. Because fear doesn't block your path. It is the path. And until you understand what it's truly guarding, you'll mistake it for an enemy when it's actually your fiercest guide. You've been taught to silence it, to conquer it, to feel the fear and do it anyway. But have you ever asked why it visits you so persistently? Why it always shows up when you're closest to becoming more of yourself? Fear is not an intruder. It's an inner voice, raw, wounded, ancient. It's the scream of the child who once wasn't protected. It's the echo of a lineage that learned to survive by shrinking. It's not weakness, it's memory. We think fear means stop, but the soul whispers, go anyway. Just listen while you move. Because fear contains a map, but only for those brave enough to sit with its symbols. Those who numb it, bypass it, or fake courage miss the transmission. You see, fear speaks in metaphor. It's the shadow that clutches your chest, not to cage your heart, but to ask if it's still beating for your truth. Most fears don't begin in this lifetime. They are inherited whispers, emotional genetics. They are the trembling hands of your mother, the panic in your grandmother's silence, the moment your father taught you to run from your own softness. And so, your fear is never just yours. It is collective, archetypal, and deeply sacred. So pause. Instead of fighting it, feel it. Let it speak. Let it stutter, weep, tremble. Let it show you what part of your soul still believes safety means self-abandonment. The fear is not blocking your expansion. It is the initiation into it. You'll never overcome fear by force. You'll only transcend it through understanding. And understanding begins the moment you stop asking, how do I get rid of this? And start asking, what is this trying to awaken in me? It starts early, before language, before choice. When your nervous system was still soft clay, absorbing the tension in the room, the sharpness in voices, the withdrawal in a mother's eyes. Fear didn't come as a monster, it came as survival. And so without realizing, you began to shape yourself around what was safest, not what was truest. You smiled when you wanted to scream. You agreed when your soul resisted. And slowly, fear stopped being a feeling and became a personality. We don't realize we're wearing fear until we try to remove it, and suddenly, everything feels exposed. Vulnerability isn't just uncomfortable, it feels dangerous, because the first time you showed your truth, it wasn't safe. And so the child within made a silent vow, I'll never let that happen again. That vow, innocent at first, becomes the prison. It's not your fear that limits you. It's the identity you built to protect yourself from ever feeling it again. Fear is a shapeshifter. It becomes politeness, achievement, perfectionism. It whispers, be small and stay loved. Be busy and stay praised. Be invisible and stay safe. And so you begin to live a life that is externally applauded but internally suffocating. Because every mask you wear to be accepted becomes a wall between you and your truth. The paradox is cruel. Your fear was trying to protect you, but it also froze you. It taught you how to belong through abandonment of self, how to be liked while being emotionally starved. And now, every time you approach expansion, it feels like betrayal. Not because you're wrong, but because your fear believes safety means staying small. This is not weakness, it's loyalty. to a younger version of you that still believes pain is waiting behind every door of change. But here's the hidden truth. Fear is not here to block you. It's here to test your devotion, not to the outcome, but to yourself. Every time fear rises, it's asking, will you betray yourself again to feel safe? And each time you say no, gently, courageously, you melt a part of the mask that was never really you. The fear doesn't disappear, but it begins to respect you. It softens. So before trying to overcome fear, sit with the version of you who created it. Not to judge her, but to thank her. She was brilliant. She kept you alive. But now, you're not just here to survive. You're here to remember, to reclaim, to return. Every fear you have is not random, it's precise. Fear is a mirror, but not the kind that reflects your face. It reflects your unconscious, your wounds, your unprocessed truths, the situations you avoid, the people who trigger you, the risks that make your body tremble. They are not coincidences. They are coded messages. The soul doesn't just speak through dreams or signs. It speaks through your fear. And what you're afraid of is often what you're here to transform. Look closer. That conversation you avoid, it carries the truth your throat never learned how to voice. That step you keep postponing, it holds the identity that your past never allowed you to wear. That person who intimidates you, they mirror a version of you that you've long buried. Your power, your voice, your unapologetic radiance. Fear doesn't lie. It exaggerates what's most alive inside you, so you're forced to face it. You keep thinking fear is a wall, but it's actually a compass. And every direction it tries to pull you away from is precisely where the gold is buried. You weren't meant to run from the discomfort. You were meant to feel it fully until it reveals its shape. Because the gift of fear is that it doesn't lie. It shows you exactly where your freedom lives, even when it comes dressed as anxiety. When you avoid fear, you abandon your calling, because the soul will always place your liberation on the other side of your resistance. That's how initiation works. It's not a path of ease, it's a path of sacred tension. The fear is not there to say, don't go. It's there to ask, are you ready to meet the part of you you've been hiding from? Most people think courage is the absence of fear, but it's not. Real courage is the intimacy with fear. It's walking toward it like a friend who holds a painful truth. It's letting fear unravel the illusions you built to stay comfortable. And in that unraveling, you find the real you, the one who doesn't need to be fearless, just present, just willing, just awake. So stop asking, how do I get rid of fear? And start asking, what is fear reflecting back to me? Because when you look fear in the eyes, not with force, but with reverence, it becomes what it always was, a mirror guiding you home. Before you had your own fears, you were already carrying the fears of others. Your mother's panic when the world didn't receive her softness. Your father's silence where his tenderness should have lived. The generations before you who swallowed their voices, abandoned their dreams, and called it survival. Their fears didn't disappear. They were passed on like whispers embedded in blood. You didn't choose them, but they live in you. You feel it when you hesitate without knowing why, when you shrink at the edge of joy, when you sabotage the very thing you've prayed for. These aren't random, they're echoes. You're living inside stories that began long before your name existed. And fear is the thread connecting it all. Not just your fear, but a collective ancestral grief that never found words. You're not weak. You're remembering. That's why some fears feel larger than life, because they are. They belong to lives that came before you, to women who were punished for speaking, to men who were shamed for feeling, to children who never got to be children. And now your soul has chosen to return, to break what they couldn't, to become what they were never allowed to be. Not out of obligation, but out of sacred restoration. Fear, in this context, is not something to fix. It's something to honor. It's not asking you to be stronger. It's asking you to be the first to stay present with what everyone before you had to numb, the first to cry the tears that were swallowed generations ago, the first to speak the truth that once meant danger, the first to become fully, deeply, unapologetically human. You don't heal ancestral fear with strategy. You heal it with ritual, with reverence, with tears that are not just yours, but carry the salt of centuries. Every time you choose presence over paralysis, you rewrite something ancient. Every time you love through fear, you become an altar for your lineage, a living prayer, a rebirth. So if the fear feels too big to name, good. That means it's not just yours. That means you've stepped into the sacred work. You are not failing. You are remembering for them all. And through you, they finally get to exhale. Every initiation begins with fear, not as a flaw, but as a sign. You're about to step beyond who you've been. Fear isn't a stop sign. It's a threshold, a sacred doorway you must pass through alone. No applause, no map, just a trembling heart and a truth too loud to ignore. This is the territory of becoming, and fear is the gatekeeper. Your soul doesn't grow in certainty. It grows in tension. In that trembling moment when everything safe feels too small and everything true feels terrifying. That's when you know you're crossing a line that cannot be uncrossed. The old self will grieve. The new self isn't born yet. And fear becomes the midwife of that rebirth. You'll be tempted to run, to delay, to rationalize your return to comfort, but the path of truth never negotiates with safety. It requires a sacred shedding, not of who you are, but of who you pretended to be to feel loved. And so, fear rises, not to destroy you, but to test your readiness, not for pain, but for expansion. There's a fire you must walk through, not outside, but within. It burns the false, the pleasing, the performing, and on the other side, something ancient waits. Your essence, untamed. The version of you that doesn't ask for permission to exist. The version who remembers that freedom is not the absence of fear, but the presence of soul. But here's the paradox. Fear can't come with you past this threshold. It was never meant to walk through the fire. It was only meant to bring you to the edge. Once you see that, you stop fighting it. You bow, you thank it, and you take the step alone. That's when the alchemy begins. So if your knees are shaking, good. If your voice trembles, beautiful. You are standing at the edge of the old world, and the only thing left to do is cross. Most people think they're afraid of failure, of being judged, of not being enough. But beneath every fear, there's something more tender. You're not afraid of what might go wrong. You're afraid of what might awaken inside you if it goes right. You're afraid of the intimacy, the exposure, the unbearable beauty of being fully seen. Fear isn't blocking your greatness. It's protecting you from feeling everything. We've been taught to fear failure, but the soul doesn't fear failure, it fears disconnection. What hurts most isn't falling. It's falling and having no one to catch you. It's dreaming big and meeting silence. It's finally opening your heart and watching someone flinch. So you shrink, not because you lack courage, but because your nervous system remembers the ache of being unmet. Every fear is trying to protect you from a feeling you once didn't know how to hold. The grief of being overlooked, the shame of being misunderstood, the loneliness of celebrating yourself in an empty room. So fear whispers, don't go there, don't try that, don't open again. Not because it doubts you, but because it loves you, because it remembers what your mind has forgotten. Emotional pain once felt like death. But what fear doesn't yet understand is that you're not that child anymore. You can hold what you couldn't then. You can feel fully and not collapse. You can fail and still belong. You can love and not disappear. This is not about being fearless. It's about becoming emotionally sovereign, the kind of sovereignty that allows you to feel everything and still choose to move. Fear thinks feeling will drown you, but feeling is how you swim back to shore. Every trembling emotion is an invitation home. The moment you let yourself feel the very thing you've avoided, that's when fear begins to unravel. Not because you forced it, but because you finally heard it, because you met it with compassion, not resistance. So next time fear rises, ask it softly, what feeling are you protecting me from? And then feel it all the way through, not to fix it, not to bypass it, but to reclaim your aliveness. Because the real fear was never failure. It was the flood of truth waiting underneath. What if fear wasn't meant to be conquered, but understood as holy? What if fear wasn't the enemy, but the guardian standing at the gates of your becoming? Every time fear rises, it's not just a reaction, it's a summons, a sacred pulse that says, you are approaching truth. And truth always demands a shedding. We've learned to demonize fear, to label it as weakness, to override it with confidence. But fear isn't asking for domination. It's asking for respect. Because fear knows the magnitude of the path ahead. It feels the weight of your calling before your mind can name it. That's why it shakes your bones, not to stop you, but to prepare you. You're not trembling because you're unworthy. You're trembling because your soul is awakening. Every spiritual initiation begins with fear. Moses trembled before the burning bush. Mary wept before the angel's message. Every mystic, prophet, and artist met fear not as failure, but as a flame. Fear, in its highest form, is an oracle. It shows you what matters most. It reveals where your soul longs to break through its own limits. But only those who bow to fear, not in submission, but in reverence, receive its transmission. Fear will never give its wisdom to the arrogant, only to the honest, to the soft, to the ones willing to kneel at the altar of their own transformation. Because fear is not here to punish you. It's here to invite you deeper, into the mystery, into the unknown, into the sacred responsibility of your becoming. And so, the next time fear arrives, don't fight it, don't numb it, don't bypass it. Sit with it like you would sit with an elder. Ask it, what are you guarding? What truth are you protecting? What threshold am I nearing? And then listen. In that trembling silence, you'll hear it. Your next becoming, calling your name. Fear is not the fire. It's the match, the one that says, you are ready. Now, burn. There comes a moment when fear no longer owns you, but becomes your compass, The panic that once froze you now sharpens your perception. The trembling that once shrank you now pulses with clarity. You don't escape fear, you digest it, you metabolize it, and in that digestion, something miraculous happens. Fear becomes intuition. A deeper intelligence awakens. Because fear isn't the absence of courage, it is the raw material of courage. Just like coal under pressure becomes diamond, fear under presence becomes wisdom. But this only happens when you stop rejecting it. When you stop asking, how do I get rid of this? And start asking, how do I meet this? That shift from control to communion is where the alchemy begins. Every time you sit with fear, you reclaim a part of yourself that once got lost. The child who didn't feel safe, the dreamer who was mocked, the lover who was left. All of them return to you, not through perfection, but through presence. Fear becomes a sacred reunion, not just with your power, but with the fragments of soul you left behind in moments of pain. In the beginning, fear feels like fire, unbearable, untouchable. But the longer you sit with it, the more it cools. It starts to soften, to whisper, to reveal. And you realize this wasn't fear. This was a message, a language, a sacred technology of the soul. What you called panic was actually a prophecy, one you were finally ready to hear. And that's when everything changes. You stop living to avoid fear. You start listening to it. You don't let it drive, but you let it speak. It tells you what matters, what's unresolved, what's alive. It becomes a sacred ally, not to make life easier, but to make it real, embodied, honest. Fear isn't weakness. Fear is raw truth without a story. And when you learn to hold it with grace, it transforms, not into absence, but into awareness, not into control, but into choice. And that is true power. There's a kind of fear that doesn't come to warn you, but to awaken you. A fear so primal, so precise, that it feels like your bones are being restructured. This is not anxiety. This is initiation. It doesn't arise from danger. It arises from proximity to your truth. And when it comes, everything old begins to shake, not because it's wrong, but because it's too small to hold who you're becoming. This fear doesn't visit everyone. It comes to those who are ready, those who have prayed consciously or not to meet their real life. It doesn't knock gently. It arrives like a storm, like a scream, like the cracking open of a shell that no longer fits. Because this is not about motivation, it's about identity. Who are you when no fear is left to hide behind? Initiation always strips. It takes what is false. It burns what is performative. It unmasks the ego, and it leaves you naked, not in shame, but in sacredness. This is where you meet your essence, not the version that is polished for the world, but the raw, trembling self who remembers what you came here to do. Fear was never blocking the path. It was the path, the only path that leads to truth. There is no ceremony more real than the moment you walk toward what you used to run from. That trembling, tearful step into the unknown, that is the rite of passage. And no one can walk it for you. That's the power of it. That's the pain of it. You are reborn not in a temple, but in the tension of your own becoming. And once you pass through that veil, the world doesn't change. You do. The noise quiets, the masks fall, the urgency dissolves. You don't become fearless, you become real. And in that realness, you finally understand. Fear was not the barrier, it was the veil. And now it's lifted. So if you're shaking, keep walking. If you're crying, let it baptize you. This fear is not a warning, it's a welcoming. You are not breaking, you are being blessed. Welcome to the other side of yourself. By now, fear has changed form. It's no longer the loud scream or the tightening chest. It has become quiet, precise, intimate. A whisper that no longer says, "Don't go," but go slowly and feel everything. Because fear, when honored, becomes instinct, inner guidance, a sacred nervous system that remembers what the mind has forgotten. You begin to see it everywhere, not as threat, but as invitation. Every fear that once paralyzed you now points to a door, a conversation you're ready to have, a truth you're ready to speak, a version of you that's been waiting behind the veil of not yet. Fear stops being the enemy and becomes the oracle, a holy messenger that says, "This way, the real you is here." And as you walk, something strange happens. You stop trying to feel brave. You start allowing yourself to feel human. You stop performing certainty. You start trusting the trembling. You no longer need to push through fear. You learn to dance with it, to hold its hand like an old teacher who walked beside you in the dark, waiting patiently for you to see it as divine. Because the truth is, fear was never here to stop you. It was here to slow you down so you wouldn't miss the sacred, so you wouldn't abandon your softness, so you wouldn't rush past the very emotion that was trying to give you back your name. In this world that celebrates urgency, fear is the last thing still asking you to pause and feel. Now, you no longer ask, "How do I conquer this?" Instead, you ask, "What part of me is ready to come home through this?" That shift changes everything. You become more gentle, more present, more whole. Because every time you meet fear with presence, you're no longer escaping yourself. You're reclaiming yourself. And that is the return, the real homecoming, not the absence of fear, but the presence of soul. Not the perfect path, but the path where every emotion is welcome, where nothing is wrong, where everything, yes, even the fear, was just love in disguise. You thought fear was the enemy, but now you see it was the invitation, the one that arrived in the dark, unannounced, unpolished, trembling. It came not to destroy you, but to dismantle who you thought you had to be. And in that unraveling, you touched something holy, your soul raw and burning, no longer hiding behind roles, masks, or silence. You were never meant to overcome fear like a mountain to be conquered. You were meant to descend into it like a temple, to sit with it, to light candles in its darkest corners, to listen to its sobs until you heard your own voice crying back. Because fear, when fully felt, becomes memory, and memory becomes meaning, and meaning becomes medicine. And now you carry that medicine, not in words, but in presence, in the way your eyes soften when someone trembles, in the way you breathe when life shakes again. You don't need to be fearless. You only need to be faithful to your body, to your feeling, to your fire. Because courage isn't loud. It's the quiet act of staying, of witnessing, of returning. The world will keep trying to sell you certainty, but your soul is far older than strategy. It knows the deeper path, the spiral one, the feminine one, the one where every tremor is sacred, every shadow is a message, and every fear is a map drawn in the language of intuition. And now you remember how to read it. So the next time fear visits, don't armor up. Don't retreat. Instead, light the incense, open the window, whisper, "Welcome back, old friend. What are you here to teach me now?" And listen. Listen not with your ears, but with your bones. They've always known. Because the fear was never trying to break you. It was trying to burn away what you're not. So what remains is holy, what remains is real, what remains is you. If you're serious about personal transformation and committed to understanding the deeper patterns behind fear, subscribe to this channel now. Here, we don't offer surface-level motivation. We go deep into the psychology, symbolism, and hidden structures that shape your emotional reality. By subscribing, you're not just staying informed. You're aligning yourself with content designed to challenge your mind, expand your awareness, and guide you toward lasting inner change. Activate the notification bell to be the first to receive each new video. Each episode is crafted to deliver insight, clarity, and tools that actually move you forward. No fluff, no noise, just real, grounded wisdom for people ready to grow